Sega.
Ready, fight!
Virtua Fighter 2 took everything that the original game introduced and improved it. Better 3D models, full texture mapping and lighting, more moves and more characters to choose from. This was as good as fighting games got at the time it released. First, we'll look at the original arcade version running on Sega Model 2A CRX hardware, which released in Japan in 1994 and the rest of the world in 1995. This I'll emulate using the Sega Model 2 emulator. Next, we'll compare it to the PC port from 1997 and look at the unique way it can use both Direct Draw and Direct 3D at the same time. After that, we'll look at each of the game's appearances in the Ryuga Gotoku studio games, namely Yakuza Kiwami 2 from 2019, Yakuza Like a Dragon from 2020, Yakuza 5 Remastered, which came to the PC in 2021, along with Judgment from 2022, and Deep Breath, Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name, from 2023. From these screenshots they all look identical, but there are some pretty big differences, and there are better and worse versions, so stick around to find out how each version compares. The one version I won't include here is the emulated Mega Drive or Genesis version, which appears on a couple of compilations on the PC, as I'm looking at 3D ports here, rather than Mega Drive emulation. The arcade was released in Japan first, in 1994, on the Sega Model 2A CRX board. It allows two players to go head-to-head on a cabinet, or one player can take on the fighters, of which there are now 10, plus a bonus fighter at the end. Before we get stuck into the arcade version, I need to discuss a shortcoming of the Model 2 emulator, which is the colours. When you boot up the game, it can look particularly gloomy, and if you go into the test menus using F2, you can see the colour bands look pretty dark. Now, you can switch the hardware to CRT, but then everything is rather bright, as though the gamma setting is too high. Apparently on real hardware you can tweak potentiometers to get the colour balance correct, but I followed a guide online to tweak the CRT shades to a bias of 76 and a gain of 47. This shows all the shades of colour in the gradient. In-game it's a lot better, but it's not 100% perfect, as the sky gradient behind some stages does miss some shades, but it's good enough to work with. The arcade version begins with an intro sequence. If you think this is a bit low resolution, it's because the arcade actually ran at just 496 by 384 pixels, and whilst the emulator can be forced to much higher resolutions, I wanted to capture this at the actual dimensions it ran at. The intro focuses quite a lot on Shun, one of the new characters, who does drunken kung fu and can have a drink if you toggle the feature in the arcade dip switches. The intro shows all the fighters going head to head, as per the first game. The title then displays, followed by a fight between two characters. Here it's the new characters of Shun and Lion. After that, the high score ranking is shown, with a couple of fighters beating one another in the background. This sequence then repeats. Now, the arcade was actually released in two key variants. The updated version, which featured some balancing adjustments, was called Virtua Fighter 2.1, and you can tell if the arcade is running this version because the intro sequence shows all the characters in their alternate second player costumes. Amusingly, Akira's white outfit is now relegated to this intro. The title screen also shows a tiny .1 next to the number 2. In this video we'll take a look at the updated 2.1 version primarily, as one of the Like a Dragon games only has that version available. I'll start the game now and you can see all the fighters. Rather worryingly, the new character Lion, a high school student, has a hobby of collecting knives. But we'll go with Sarah, as she's the only one I learned some moves from. The first fight against Lao is usually pretty easy, especially as I set the difficulty to easy, given I'm not the best Virtua Fighter player. Next up I fight myself, in this attractive lightning-infused arena. I win the first round, and she wins the second, before I triumph. The third stage is Shun's floating raft stage. These huge moving bridges really stood out in the arcade as they cast a shadow over the play area. Shun doesn't prove too much trouble to me here. Next up is Pai, and she's quick, leading to my first outright lose. Luckily, I have endless imaginary money in this emulated version, so on we go. After eventually defeating her, it's over to Lion, luckily without his knife collection. We have a little fight atop the Great Wall of China, and I manage to beat him. Next up is Jeffrey, who is not only tough, but will also punish you with throws should you let him get close enough. I needed a fair bit of imaginary money to eventually beat him. Kagi is now in an attractive purple outfit, presumably his blue original shade was too close to Sarah's outfit. He takes me to 3 sets, before he accidentally steps out of the ring. Jackie, Sarah's brother, is next on the hit list. He's actually pretty darn tough, and it needed a good few restarts to beat him. Wolf's stage is high on a mountain in the snow for some reason. I managed to cheese him a lot using the same move, though it did go to 3 rounds. Akira is usually pretty tough, and once again proves to be, with a double KO for me. After a good few goes, I eventually managed to defeat him, essentially winning the game and sending me to the bonus fighter, Durao.
Better run home to Mama now.
Now, for some odd reason, Durao's fight takes place in an underwater Atlantis-style arena, which slows down all the physics, providing a stiff final challenge as you have to retime all your moves in slow motion. I'm obviously not great at this, and get defeated. Regardless of this defeat, you still see the end credits, with scenes from your various fights replaying using a motion blur effect on your fighter. After the Sega logo, you get to put in your name by beating the letters into submission. I couldn't quite figure out the instructions here. You have to hold defend whilst pushing left or right to change characters, but I only discovered this later, so I'm called AA. Anyway, here's a minute of this original version without me talking over it. The PC version released in 1997 and is essentially a high-resolution port of the Sega Saturn title. This is my big box copy from Expert Software, which in the UK released in a Fight Night compilation with Virtua Fighter Remix and Last Bronx. Initially the game didn't support Direct 3D. This original release also allowed you, in the F6 menu, to show the game in the Model 2 screen size, which is 496 by 384 pixels, like the arcade. However, it doesn't scale bitmap artwork particularly well, so the title and displays in-game look rather messy. Moving to the Direct 3D version, when the intro starts you realise the background now looks awful. So I'll go into the F6 menu and choose all elements as Direct Draw to see how that looks. It's essentially a high-resolution version of the Sega Saturn release. But what if we make everything Direct 3D maxed out? Surely it looks better. Well, the terrible low-quality background returns. But where this game is truly unique is that you can mix and match Direct Draw elements with Direct 3D, so we can re-enable the high-resolution Direct Draw scaling backgrounds whilst keeping the fighters and stage in anti-aliased, filtered Direct 3D. There is a caveat here, and it's that the Model 2 arcade characters do have noticeable breakup on their body and faces if you use Direct 3D, such as here on Akira's face. But the benefits of Direct 3D include better highlights on the characters and anti-aliasing, so they're not so pixelated. So it's a bit of a toss-up whether you can put up with the breakup or not. Otherwise, the intro sequence plays out like the arcade original, with the ranking screen breaking it up. Additionally, if you start the game and go into Options, you can switch the game to the 2.1 version, which, like the arcade, renders the intro sequence using the characters' alternate costumes. Starting the PC version, you'll see that there are a lot of modes. These include Team Battle, a feature that would return in Virtua Fighter 3, a watch mode, and even portraits of the characters that were released on special CD discs on the Saturn, but we'll start with the arcade mode. The fighter portraits here are no longer 3D models, and the small portraits are no longer hand-drawn images, and Lion now likes skateboarding instead of knives. My first fight with Lau shows how the direct draw 2D scaling backgrounds work. As a fallback for 3D models, I think they're quite interesting, certainly better than the direct 3D low resolution mushy background option. I dispatch Lau pretty easily. Next up is my head to head with myself, complete with lightning flashes. This stage looks again pretty good. I find it easier to beat myself in this version though. Shun's stage has definitely taken a hit though. The background no longer moves, and crucially there are no bridges. It feels rather budget variant compared to the arcade version. Pi's stage is colourful, but slightly less exciting than the arcade. There's also the odd clipping effect, like when I win here and the camera clips through the stage. Lion's stage works pretty well despite being the same scaling background approach, and he's my first complete loss. But I continue and defeat him. Jeffrey in this version doesn't feel quite as tough, and there's that dodgy camera clipping again. Never mind, moving on. Kagi's stage feels pretty flat compared to the arcade. As an opponent, he's not too tough. Herc, more clipping. Anyway, I defeat him and move on again. It's brother versus sister again. Jackie feels a bit easier than the arcade, despite the PC arcade mode not having any specific difficulty options. There is an expert mode though if you're feeling confident. Wolf's huge mountain is well represented, but the cage surrounding the arena is missing here. Wolf takes me to 3 sets, but I still win. Akira is pretty much beaten by me cheesing the same move over and over again. And here's Dural's underwater level. We're missing the wobbly background effect and reflections on the floor, but the slow motion, more difficult physics are well represented here. And I fail again to beat Dural. The PC port makes an approximation of the motion blur end credits, but the blur isn't handled quite the same and looks a bit messy. At least you can still beat the letters into submission. And I finally realised how to change letters, so I'm now known as I. You get a bonus image for winning too. Here's a minute of this version.
Go!
The arcade version of Virtua Fighter 2 and 2.1 have appeared in a number of the Ryuga Gotoku Studio Yakuza and Judgment games. These being, at the time of making this video, Yakuza Kiwami 2 from 2019, Yakuza Like a Dragon from 2020, Yakuza 5 Remastered which came to the PC in 2021, along with Judgment from 2022, and Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name from 2023. This last version only includes the 2.1 version of the game. In Yakuza Kiwami 2 from 2019, you'll find the game in various Club Sega arcades such as this one in Sotenbori. There are 2 key issues with this version. Firstly, it doesn't run full screen, instead using this fake arcade surround, and also is particularly jerky, running at around 38 frames per second. This is actually an issue with Yakuza Kiwami 2 generally, since it was patched by Sega a while ago. All the minigames run at under 40 frames per second, which is far too jerky. However, if you go to PC Gaming Wiki and install the Silent Patch upgrade, it unlocks the frame rate and then the game will play at the correct almost 60 frames per second that the arcade original uses. Usually I don't use mods here, but it's clear that Sega messed up the game with this most recent patch. After the intro, you can then see the ROM set this game uses is Japanese, as the instructions for activating ranking mode are in Japanese. You then get to see the ranking high score table, as per the arcade. Starting the game, it's clear that it is the arcade, as Lion likes knives again, instead of skateboards. The graphics here are sharper than the original arcade, with smoother filtering on the background pathway in Lau's stage in particular. The gradient in the sky is also better shaded than the arcade running under the Model 2 emulator. The only downsides here are it not running full screen, plus the fake scanline effects which darken the picture somewhat. Here's my fight against Sarah, complete with storm effects. The waiting for a challenger text in the top right is also Japanese in this version of the game. My fight with Shun shows how nice this stage can look, and look, he has a drink. This is definitely the Japanese version, as the US and export versions default to him not drinking. And here I lose in this version. I'm not going to play these ports through fully, as they're essentially the same as the arcade that we've looked at already. Yakuza Like a Dragon was the next game to feature Virtua Fighter 2, which made it to the PC in 2020. In this small arcade I find the easy version of the arcade machine. First impressions are that this seems identical to the Yakuza Kiwami 2 version, but the colours are a touch darker and more vibrant. We're still using the Japanese arcade ROM set here though, as the ranking instructions show. Once again we check Lion likes knives, then start as Sarah. I plough through Lao quickly enough, as there are more buttons that help you complete tricky moves on these ports than the arcade original. Fighting myself, the stage is definitely darker coloured here than the Kiwami 2 version. Over to Shun, and the bridge skirmish goes a little better than in Kiwami 2.
Better run home to Mama now.
I'm not sure how old his mama would be. Next up is Pi, and again everything is a touch more colourful. Despite a good opening set, Pi soon kicks my butt, so that's enough of this port. Despite being an older game with a less good looking and fun 3D world, Yakuza 5 Remastered made it to the PC in 2021. All the arcades in this game have the same internal 3D building model, and this one uniquely features Taiko no Tatsujin, a Namco arcade title which was pretty unexpected. But we're here for Virtua Fighter 2.1, although this version is set to the toughest setting. This Yakuza title also uniquely allows you to adjust the screen, so you can turn off the fake arcade surrounds and scale the arcade game as large as you like. I'll run it full screen, thank you. This version looks a bit less vibrant than the one in Yakuza Like a Dragon, but runs smooth enough. It's also interestingly using the English language ROM set, as you can see on the ranking screen. Additionally, when you pause the game, you can see all the characters' moves from the cards that were mounted on the original arcade cabinet. This is unique to this version. Once again, knives check, then Sarah. As I mentioned on the intro, the gameplay looks a bit lighter here, but plays well. Although this is the toughest setting, so Lao is a bit harder to defeat. Sarah's stage is a bit lighter here, and she's a bit tougher to fight, but I win again, eventually. Shun's stage looks as unique as ever, but here is actually a touch easier to defeat. And on to Pi, where things start well, then go downhill, and after a tussle she eventually defeats me. Let's look at the next version. Judgment from 2022 was a nice diversion to the Yakuza titles whilst sharing the same locations. There are a lot of arcade titles in this game, of which Virtua Fighter 2 and 2.1 are included. The colour balance here is back to the vibrancy seen in Yakuza Like a Dragon, but we're again using the Japanese ROM set. The game also runs full screen with no sign of the fake arcade surrounds, so yay for that. Once again we pick Sarah and start off with Lao. This looks at first glance identical to the version in Yakuza 5 Remastered, but that's not quite the case. Stick around for the pixel compare to see why. Once again it's time to beat myself up, haha! This goes pretty well. Shun's stage is comparable to the other versions, but here he gets the better of me and enjoys getting drunk. And then he beats me clean sweep. So on to the final port. It's time for the short game with an extremely long name. Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name. This small arcade appears early on and allows Virtua Fighter 2.1 to be played on easy level. Unlike the other versions, it helpfully shows the controls before you begin, instead of you having to pause. It's also like Judgment, running full screen with no arcade surround and in the more vibrant colour tint. Not only that, but unlike Yakuza Like a Dragon and Judgment, this version does use the English language ROM set. A final check on knives before starting with Sarah, and then smashing Lao into submission. This definitely feels pretty easy. The Sarah stage again looks good, but it isn't long before she beats me. I double down and fight back, and eventually beat her though. How does the Shun fight go this time? Pretty well actually. He's not getting time to get drunk this time. Pi though is a step too far, at least on one credit for me. She demolishes me. Now all these ports looked fairly similar, but they're not. Let's see what the differences are. Here we'll compare each version of the game at the pixel level. First up, here's the arcade running in the Model 2 emulator. Note the banding in the sky is missing some shades, so the colour here isn't 100% perfect. Let's wipe across to the unpatched PC version running at Model 2 resolution using Model 2 3D characters. If you look at the interface, it looks very messy as everything is crushed down badly. So let's wipe across to the PC version at its full 640x480 resolution, again using just Direct Draw. It's a little wider than the arcade original. Wiping to the full Direct 3D version, we now have better character lighting and the filtered stage. However, the maximum quality Direct 3D background just looks terrible. So let's go to my preferred hybrid version, using the high quality 2D Direct 3D backgrounds with everything else Direct 3D. The only real issue is the breakup around polygons on the fighters when using the Model 2 3D fighter characters under Direct 3D. But what if we switch the fighters to their so-called normal 3D models, which I expect the Sega Saturn version used? Interestingly, Lao's colours look a touch better, but there are far fewer polygons used on both fighters, and their footwear textures look dreadful. The only real benefit is the breakup on the models has now gone. Let's now go back to the arcade, but this time shrunk down a bit to the same size the windowed Yakuza titles use. Wiping across to Yakuza Kiwami 2, you can see how it's all a bit higher resolution, especially the path in the background. The scanline effects do make the picture a bit darker though. Wiping to Yakuza Like a Dragon, and the colours are a touch deeper and less washed out. Let's go back to the full screen arcade original, and now wipe across to the version in Yakuza 5 Remastered. The stage and background appear slightly differently here, but the game window is the same aspect ratio as the original arcade version. However, wiping across to Judgment now has the game running at 4:3 aspect ratio, which is slightly wider than the arcade original, the same aspect ratio the PC version uses. Finally, and most strangely of all, the version in Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name, has the stage zoomed up a bit closer, yet everything else is identical. Weird. Let's now put all the versions head to head, so you can see and hear the differences between them.
One, ready, go! KO! KO!
I blow it.
Fight two, ready, go!
Better run home to Mama now.
KO!
Better run home to Mama. Better run.
KO!
Mama now.
Fight two, ready, go!
The arcade version of Virtua Fighter 2 is a perfect example of a sequel taking everything the first game had and expanding on it, making for a memorable experience. The PC port is one of the most fascinating Sega PC games. The ability to pick and choose between Direct Draw and Direct 3D I don't think I've ever seen offered in another game. It's the Saturn version on steroids. The version in Yakuza Kiwami 2 suffers from a terrible frame rate unless you install the third-party Silent Patch mod. Otherwise, the fake arcade surrounds make the picture a bit small. Yakuza Like a Dragon is pretty much the same, but the colours are better. The version in Yakuza 5 Remastered is the only version that allows you to choose the screen size and turn the fake arcade surrounds on and off, so it can be commended for that. It also runs at arcade accurate dimensions. Judgment runs the game at 4:3 aspect ratio, but is otherwise similar to the Yakuza Like a Dragon version colour-wise, except that it runs full screen. And the version in Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name, is fairly similar again. The main difference between all these games is that the Yakuza Kiwami 2, Yakuza Like a Dragon, and Judgment versions all feature the Japanese version of the game, whilst Yakuza 5 Remastered and Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name use the English language version. Overall, there's not a lot of difference between the ports. If I had to pick one of the Yakuza and Judgment versions to play, it would be Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name, as it's in English and the colours are a little bit less washed out. If you like this comparison of Virtua Fighter 2, then give it a like, or subscribe, ring the bell, etc. to be notified when I put something else live. And join me next time for a really weird puzzle game.